TitleMatchNetwork.com.
Welcome to another edition of the RF Video Shoot interview series. Today we are joined by none other than PN News. Thanks for being here today with us.
Yo, baby, yo, baby, yo.
My first question is, how did you get started in the wrestling business? Were you a fan growing up?
Yeah, I was a fan growing up. I played college football. When I quit college football, I was traveling up through Big Ten country up in Wisconsin, visiting some friends that were playing for the University of Wisconsin. A guy by the name Rick Graff, Bob Streeter. I walked into a bar called Buck's Madison Square Garden, and when I walked in there, I was having a good time that night. I ended up helping throw somebody out, and the guy hired me on the spot. The guy that owned it hired me on the spot, and I worked there for a couple months just during the summer while I was up there. And I remember there was an incident, and I threw like 4 guys out at one time, and I was out in the street. The fight tried to pursue out in the street, and I broke it up out there, and there were these big, huge plate glass windows, and so everybody in the bar was seeing what was going on, and I leapfrogged over like the trunk of a car, and when I came back into the bar after breaking the whole thing up, the place just erupted. It was like, wow, they went crazy, and I was talking to a guy named Bob Matson. He was a state treasurer for Minnesota at the time, and he'd asked me if I'd ever thought about being a professional wrestler, and I said no. And he gave me his card, and he said, "Well, if you ever think about it, get in touch with me." And I got lots of connections up in Minneapolis. Of course, that was AWA at the time, and we're talking like 86, 87. And he goes, so I called him about 2 months later, and he said, "Well, I'm on a hunting trip this week. Come over next week, and we'll have a talk." So I drove from Madison, Wisconsin to Minneapolis, Minnesota, and basically Bob sponsored me and put me through Brad Reagan's camp there, which was associated with the AWA, and I was there. I used to, you went 5 days a week, basically, and you went either 2 hours in the morning or 2 hours at night, and I chose to go 2 hours in the morning and 2 hours at night, and tried to take advantage of being trained, because it was whether I went 2 hours or 4 hours, it was the same money,
right.
So I took advantage of it and started with the AWA in March that year. Was my first match on March 3rd. I remember wrestling in the Minneapolis auditorium. So.
Was the training more difficult than you thought, or was it?
No, I played college sports and stuff like that, so it wasn't. I was expecting it to be, we were doing squats and everything like that. I was expecting it was just like doing amateur sports. Anybody who's done any kind of amateur sports is, they know about it. I think back then the business was a lot different. You know what I mean? There's a lot of other doors that are open to anybody who wants to be a wrestler today than there was back then in the late 80s.
Memories of, as far as the training goes, what was harder for you to pick up? Was psychology or bumping or?
God, it's a good question, actually. I don't know. I think psychology is probably going to be harder than anything. I mean, I was an athlete anyway, so the bumping was okay. I mean, I learned how to do the break fall pretty quickly, and the big thing about getting in the business back then is when you started this job, you were wrestling 300 days, a year at least. And in fact, when I was out in Portland, I went nine months without getting a single day off. You know what I mean? So
right.
You had that experience, so it was really easy to pick it up. And I was young at the time; I was 19, so it was easy to pick up stuff like that. So I think it all kind of fell together, all basically at the same time.
Memories of your first match?
My first match. I blew up. I was supposed to do about 8 minutes. I did about 4 minutes. And I'm trying to think of the guy's name right now. I wish I could, because I got a lot of respect for it, because he carried me. He carried me through that match. I walked to the ring as one of the Guardian Angels, and I came out of the ring. Rick Gantner, that's who it was. Rick Gantner
right.
was my first match, and he carried me for the 4 minutes that we did, and it was.
That's for Bourne, right?
Yeah, that was for Bourne in the Minneapolis auditorium, and I was just green, and I had no idea what I was doing, but thank God I had Rick, there for me,
Did you have any interaction at all with Vern back in the day, or?
Yeah, I knew Vern, you know what I mean? We do the interviews and stuff like that. Vern was always around. Vern, he was passionate about the job. What else can you say about him? You know what I mean? The guy was an amateur wrestler in the 40s, and he was he was something else. He was bit. I mean, you'd have to say he was a little bit arrogant, but rightly so. He was, in the early '80s, he was like the biggest territory in the country,
right?
If not the world.
Any other standout moments from AWA that you want to talk about, or?
Kurt Hennig was a big influence on me in those first few months that I was in the business, because I remember getting in a vehicle with him, and him he talking to me about psychology, talking to me about the business, talking to me about things. He said, "You won't understand it now, kid, but in a few years you'll go, that's what he meant." And that's basically how it happened. A couple of years later, you're going, the light bulb goes on, and there you are. So, I mean, Kurt was a super influence for me at that point.
Did you see any of his classic ribs from back in the day?
Oh God, I was probably the victim of a couple of them. You know what I mean? When I being a greenhorn coming in to a territory, I'd get my bags padlocked to water pipes hanging in the dressing room. So I'd come back from a match or come back from watching a match, trying to learn, and there'd be my bag. I'd have to get some superintendent to come and with a bolt cutters and cut that stuff down. You know what I mean? So.
Right. After the AWA territory, what other territories did you work? I know you said Portland.
I went out to Pacific Northwest. Worked for Don Owens. That was really an enlightenment for me, because that was just great being out there. Don Owens is probably the reason why I'm still in the business today. And Lynn Denton, of course, the grappler, was a tremendous influence on me out there. Guys like Dave Sierra. I was out there with Matt Bourne, Colonel De Beers, Buddy Rose was a tag team partner of mine. Worked with guys like Steve Dahl, Scott Peterson. We had basically, though, half the team was young, half the team was experienced, but they just was good ideas, and it was just good. We were out in the market. In that market, we were doing better ratings than New York Saturday Night Main Event at the time. They were doing that on NBC once a month. And in the market, we had better ratings on the Saturday night than New York did at that time.
I remember that, yeah.
Yeah, so.
How was Don Owens as a promoter?
Like I said, he's the reason why I stayed in the business. He had he loved me for some reason. God knows why, but God bless him, and, God rest his soul. He was probably one of my favorite promoters ever to work for. Just Jesus Christ, I wish I could pay you more. Christ, Avalanche. I got a bag of beans. I got bread. I ain't got no butter. Boy should just get a bag of beans. He had a saying for everything. It's just, he was, and then he'd backhand you a wad of money, and you're like happy with what you were getting. I mean, I was, 19, 20 years old, and I was making pretty good money at the time.
Did any of the vets mentor you early on at all?
Oh, yeah. I mean, everybody I was around, like I said, Buddy was my tag team partner. Buddy was good for me. I was driving up and down the road, heels and baby faces were riding in separate cars at the time. And I would ride up and down the road with Buddy Rose, Colonel De Beers, and Lynn Denton and myself, and we'd drive there. And the knowledge that was in that car was just phenomenal. I mean, you can't, a greenhorn like myself at the time, I couldn't have asked for anybody better to be in the car with me. You know what I mean? It was just that knowledge and just the different, because everybody's got a different psychology. Everybody thinks a little bit different. But, I mean, Ed Lasowski's nickname was Easy Ed. Buddy Rose was just a tremendous worker, and at his size, one of the best bump takers of all time. Lynn Denton was a tremendous at psychology. So I had really just like a plethora of information that I could just dig from, and it helped create me and make me into what I am today, I guess.
Early on, did any of the vets test you out in the ring? Try to stretch you or anything?
It's hard to stretch a guy that's 400 pounds. But, I mean, I had guys, Matt Bourne, he tried to have a go a couple times, and one time he'd beat me, and, the next time I'd get lucky and I'm whizzing him over. You know what I mean? I don't come from a big amateur background. I did do some intramural college wrestling, and that was about the extent of it. So, I was mainly a football player, so...
What other companies did you get to work for before you went over to Europe?
Those were the two main companies. What happened is Fujinami came from New Japan, and he saw me out in Portland, and he watched me work, and he goes, "Oh, you next Bam Bam Bigelow, Japan," and I was like, wow, because Bam Bam was in New York, and there was no cross, working at that point, and so they'd already set up a date before he left Portland. I already knew I was going in February to Japan, and this was like, I'd say early November, late October that year, and then all of a sudden Fuji went from there, and he went over and did a championship over in Germany. and and I had already met Otto Vance in the AWA, because when I got to the AWA, he was like the world champion there for Vern. And I remember getting a phone call from Otto Vance and asking me, hey, would you like to come wrestling? Because Big Jim Harris had some issues and he had to fly back to the States. So he called me and said, I said, yeah, how long do I got? He says, 4 days. I didn't even have a passport. So I ended up driving up to Seattle, getting my passport done in 1 hour. I was on a plane within 50 hours. I was on a plane flying to Germany for my first international.
So you didn't get to go to New Japan then?
No, I went to New Japan that February. So I went to Bremen in Germany, which is North Germany, and that's the end of the season for them.
Right.
So I did 36. It was great. I mean, I went to Bremen. I was there for 5 weeks. I came back with everything but $200 of the money that Otto Vance paid me, because they did stuff over there what's called Geldstrafe, which is money. They would fine you money in the matches. They did red and yellow card. And you do rounds and all that stuff.
Right.
And if you did something wrong in the match, you would get fined. Heels and baby faces would get fined too. Well, what would happen is the fans could come up and pay those fines. So I was living off the money that the fans were coming up and paying us.
Wow.
And I wasn't, and I was paying for my hotel out of that money. So at that point, all my money I was making was just going in a drawer, and I brought it all back with me. It was a great time for me.
Who came up with the name Cannonball Grizzly?
Well, when I first got to Bremen, they were calling me Paul the Grizzly, and I was like, okay, yeah, that's fine. It's out of my hands. And so, and I kind of liked the name Grizzly, and so it worked out that way. And then they watched me, and they were watching me run with speed across the ring and throwing drop kicks and doing stuff that, they didn't see too many. In fact, nobody had ever done that in Europe at my size. And so the next year when they booked me back the following spring, they changed my name from Paul the Grizzly to Kanunenkugeln Grizzly, which the word Kanunenkugel translated means cannonball. And I said, well, why, because I didn't know any German at the time. Now I'm fluent, but at the time I didn't know any German. And he goes, I said, well, what the hell's a cannonball? Kanunenkugel. What the hell is a Kanunenkugel? And he goes, well, it's like a cannonball. You're like a shot out of a cannon. And I was like, okay, that's pretty good. Can't we just call me Cannonball Grizzly then? No, we're in Germany and Austria. Kanunenkugel. I said, listen, I'm an American. Can't we just, so at first they were starting to call me Kanunenkugel, and I just, every time I got on the mic, I kept calling myself Cannonball Grizzly. And so then they changed it eventually to Cannonball and let me run with the Cannonball thing. So the Cannonball Grizzly came up there, and that was like 1980, 89, so.
What were the differences wrestling in Europe compared to the States?
Psychology is a little different. Of course, you're working in the rounds and stuff like that. So, and I enjoyed working in rounds. It was the psychology in working in rounds is you got to remember, once that bell goes, then you got to start the psychology over in the next round. You know what I mean?
Right.
So you have to learn to be able to work that system, which sounds kind of complicated, but at the same time, it isn't. You know what I mean? And people are saying, oh, yeah, but it can't be that bad. You get a break in between rounds. A minute isn't very long. It's like putting somebody in a hold,
right,
for about a minute. And, you're not getting that much of a breather if you really think about it. Anybody who's done any amateur wrestling, or amateur boxing or boxing period, knows that a minute ain't much time to really catch your wind. You got to be in tremendous shape for that to happen. So.
Did you like living over there?
I did. I live there now. So
yeah.
I lived in Austria for 9 years almost. I lived in Germany for about 7 or 8 years. I lived in England for 3-4 years, and I'm back in England right now. It's wonderful. It's a wonderful place to visit and live, and I mean, it's just beautiful countries over there. The culture is a little bit different than the United States. I mean, when I'm over there, I miss being here, but you know what I mean. It's just been great, and I've had a tremendous career from there, and I've just gone all over the world. So,
as far as traveling over there, what was the travel like?
In the CWA, there was no travel. We would wrestle. We would wrestle. We'd start in Linz in like the end of April or early May, and we would stay in Linz for 28 days. It was a 28-day tournament, and we would work in the same venue every night for those 28 days. I mean, it was insane, and you'd have full houses 4 days a week at least, you know. And so that was great. And then from there, you'd go to Graz, and you'd do 3 weeks in Graz. Then you'd go to Vienna, and you'd be in Vienna from the beginning of July to the end of August. And Vienna, you were outside. You'd have these campers. I bought like a nice camper, and I was living outside in these camping places. So you're outdoors all day long. My daughter was playing out under the sun. I mean, it was just beautiful. Loads of fresh air, swimming pool. You know, you can visit lots of sightseeing, wine festivals, and you know, it's just like an old world style way. And it was just kind of it wasn't hectic, you know.
Right.
And then after Vienna, at the end of August, we would go to a little place in Canton, which is in Austria. It is a place called Seeboden, and Seeboden was nestled up in the Alps, and it was this crystal clear lake that you could see 100 feet down, and we'd spend 3 or 4 days there, and then from there we'd go up to North Germany, which is like it'd be about an 11-hour trip or something like that in your car, and then you'd be in Hanover for my longest Hanover tour was 70 days, so you'd stay in Hanover for 2 months. And then from Hanover, you'd do Dortmund, which was a 10-day tournament, and then from Dortmund, then you go up and you finish in Bremen, and Bremen was a 36-day tournament, and the last day was in the big hall with 12,000 people in the arena, and then Otto Vance would always bring over somebody to fight him in the championship, whether it was Terry Funk or Hawk or somebody, he'd bring Dirk Murdoch, Nick Bockwinkel was over there, Andre the Giant, he'd always bring in a big name for himself to fill that arena up on the last night. So we do 35 days in a 4,000-seat arena, and then we do the last day in a 12,000-seater arena. God, it was just, those were great days. They were great times.
Who were some of the guys that you like to work with over there?
Fit Finley was always a pleasure. Tony Sinclair, Dave Taylor. I worked with those guys quite a bit. A guy named Danny Boy Collins, DBC, great worker. All those guys. I really enjoyed working with a lot of the English workers, and they helped develop me too, because there's just really a lot of talent that comes out of England back in those days. They were just great talent to work with.
What about Otto Vance? What was he like?
Great promoter to work with at the beginning. In the end, when it was kind of falling apart, he seemed to me like he was intentionally trying to run it in the ground. Like he wanted to. Once he retired from active wrestling, it just seemed like his heart wasn't in it. He wasn't promoting the same. He wasn't putting the same effort into it. He had the competition of WWE being on the TV, which was hurting our shows because we didn't have television. You know what I mean? We relied on the live audience.
Now, when Vader went over there, Leon White, did you get to work with him at all?
I never worked with him over there. Vader was the champion when I was over there. I didn't work Vader until he was here with WCW, and then we did a few matches there. And I actually like working with Leon. I know I heard some guys made some complaints, but Leon, he worked tight, and I like it tight. So.
What are your memories of Chris Benoit?
Chris was over there. He was good. He was a good time. I remember the first year Chris came over, me, him, and Scott Hall, and Papa Shango, Charles Wright. We shared a dressing room together, and we had a lot of laughs, at that time. So I really enjoyed Chris's time then.
What are your thoughts of the tragedy that happened?
It's a shame. What I'm really disappointed on is how the media tried to bend it and make it a steroid issue when it real clearly wasn't. When you're dealing with mental illness, it's a shame, and it sickens me that the media has never apologized for some of the accusations that they have made over that thing. Because, in reality, Chris was a good guy.
Right. After being over in England, stuff like that, how did you wind up in WCW? I don't want to be missing anything.
When I was in the I was in CWA. I did the Japan thing.
Let's talk about Japan.
I went for one tour, and it was at the same time when when Bam Bam had left New York, so he was going to go back. So that kind of screwed up my deal. On one side, but I was set to go back to Japan. Sakaguchi, who was like the president of the company at the time, he saw me wrestle the last night in Bremen that year, and he goes, "Oh, I think you come back to Japan now," you know. So I was set to go back, but then that's when I started with the WCW, and I was fully under contract for them, and they didn't have a deal with New Japan at that point yet. And my character, PN News, which was like the development of PN News, the rap idea was like my idea. Dusty came up with the PN News part. Because of, you know, he said, well, CNN, PNN, you know, baby, it's the PNN, the CNN, people gonna understand, you see, you know, they'll be able to know it's all about Ted Turner and TBS, if you will. So, you know, that was Dusty's thing.
Did you like the gimmick?
Yes and no. There were some things about it I really liked, but the only problem I had with the gimmick is I sounded like an imbecile sometimes at the beginning because I didn't know how to deal with not having a playback speaker directly at the ringside. So you got to remember when those speakers are up in the top of the venue, and it's coming back to you in a split second later. So I'd be hearing the music, and then I'd start my rap on my beat, but it was coming out a half second later off the mic, and then I'd be going, you know, and it would screw me up at first, and it took me a little while to get used to that happening to me in these large venues. But I mean, eventually I conquered it, but then I was soon gone anyway. So
I was going to ask you, did you know how to rap at all?
Yeah, you know, I did. It was not by any means a professional thing, but I did have the thing was, I mean, I'd rap. You know, I'd do raps, and I could do that stuff. You know, just hanging around with the guys, I would do raps. I'd, you know, copy somebody else's rap and stuff, and I enjoyed having a little bit of fun with that. So I mean, yeah, I mean, I really thought that it was something that I could really do. And then when I was with WCW, the manager from Keith Sweat and Boyz II Men, who were like the top, you know, R&B stuff at the time, I had a meeting with him at the Twin Towers for the CNN Towers, and he had a 6-song EP that he wanted me to do. He was going to get me on Yo MTV Raps, because remember that was going to, and he was going to give me radio time and everything like that. And somebody in the WCW office actually blocked it. So I mean, I don't know if they were just didn't want me to get over. Right. I don't know what. Why wouldn't you want somebody to get over? You know, because that's mainstream. Yeah. Here you go. You got a guy, you know, regardless of, you know, what you think of him personally. Here's you got a guy that's going to get you on MTV. You know, which, you know, every kid was watching MTV at the time. You know, it was the only video station or the video thing there was, unless you were watching Night Tracks on TBS. You know.
Let's talk about Dusty Rhodes. What are your thoughts on Dusty? Did you like him as a booker?
Let's just say Dusty was very good at getting himself over when he was doing his thing and stuff like that, and you got to admire him for that. What do I think of Dusty Rhodes? Disappointed. He made promises to me, and he reneged on those promises because of bullshit that was, you know, politics. Well, I'll tell you what happened is basically I've been blackballed over the last 20 years because somebody said I was a thief.
I was going to ask you about that, so I'm glad you're bringing it up.
Well, what happened, we were on a tour in England, in Sheffield. We were in Sheffield when this happened, and Terry Taylor came up to me and says, "Hey, dude, somebody's, you know, been in my bag. They're taking my money." So immediately I went back, checked my bag. My money was also missing, right? So, I mean, I'm like, fuck, well, there's cameras. I saw there were cameras in the back. I said, let's see if there's any fucking information about this stuff. Well, of course, nothing ever came back to me. Well, all of a sudden, and then that night I was in the hotel bar having a drink, and I just got about 2 days before we left for England, I just got a secured credit card because my credit score was shit. Right. And I just got so I had like $500 on that card, right? So I put everything on my room, and then in the morning when I checked out, I just paid on the credit card. Well, all of a sudden, rumors flying around. All of a sudden, I'm the thief, you know. So I got pinned with that, and I mean, basically, I got guys blocking me, and you know, in the WWE because you know I'm not going to name any names on that, but I got guys blocking me because they actually believe the lies that were being told and lies that have been, you know what it's like, telephone, telegraph, tele-wrestler. The story is, I drank a cup of coffee, he drank a cup of coffee with milk, he drank a cup of coffee and he spilled it. You know, the story just goes on, and every time it gets told, it gets changed, and and lies are told, so I don't know what's worse, and if I've got loads of sins. Have I stolen before? Yeah. I have loads of sins in my life, but that's not my sin. I don't have to pay for that one. So, I mean, God's my witness on that.
What happened with you and Rick Rude?
Rick Rude, I don't want to go into too much detail about it, but we were in the same room together, and there was a little bit of a scuffle. He threw a punch at me, hit me. I said, Rick, it's time for you to go. The next morning he called up, he apologized, we'd had a little bit too much to drink, both of us had. It was over little or nothing. That was the same thing about it. He just kind of flipped out. I don't want to tarnish the guy's, I don't want to step on a dead man's grave or anything like that. Got a lot of respect for Rick and stuff like that, but it was really over stupid shit, you know what I mean?
Right.
So.
Did they do an angle or something like that with Mr. Hughes?
There was an angle that was starting with Mr. Hughes, and just because I had the black eye, it kind of worked in there, but the angle went nowhere because we did the Starrcade a couple days later, and Ron Simmons slammed me, and it was an accident, but when he slammed me, I was right by the rope, and my top foot got caught on the rope, and it basically pulled my hip out, and my hip was dislocated, so I was out of action for a little while. So,
what are your memories of Jim Herd?
Jim Herd, not much. He was a puppet. You know what I mean? He was just a puppet.
Yeah.
And when Dusty got in there, Dusty kind of controlled Jim for the most part, and then Kid Fry was another clown.
You got to work with Steve Austin when he was just coming up.
Yeah.
In the business. What are your memories working with Steve?
Steve was talented back then. Everybody knew he was gonna be a big star, and it's just he's a guy who basically deserved a break, and I'm just happy. I'm happy he got it. You know what I mean? I don't begrudge anybody getting a break like that, and I think as far as his gimmick goes, he was in the right place at the right time, which is where everybody should be when they get that opportunity. And it was great because who doesn't want to hit their boss? Who doesn't want to
Yeah.
It's just, it was the perfect gimmick, and he suited it. And throughout all the years of professional wrestling, people have tried to do that lone wolf gimmick, and he's the only one who's really ever succeeded at it. So.
Who would you travel with back then in WCW?
Different guys. I would be with the Smoking Guns. I liked the Armstrongs. They were great to travel with, or Ricky Morton, or Robert Gibson, Matt Bourne, Scott Hall, or Diamond Dallas Page. A bunch of different crews. It depends on who you were on the road with, right? But I like getting in that minivan with the boys and just having a laugh.
Any good travel stories from back in the day?
God, travel stories. I can tell you a few stories. I don't know if they're good ones. I remember going over a cliff with Dave Sierra back in Portland. Literally, this is an act of God type thing where we were saved. I remember we were going a little fast, and it was icy roads. We were going from Lapine, Oregon to Medford, which was down in South Oregon, and it was icy roads on these mountain trails, and we were doing about 30 when we should have been doing about 15, and we slid off the road, and we went straight over this cliff, and for some reason there was this huge tree, pine tree that was cut, but it was never removed, and it was just laying there, and the car hit that, did a couple rolls and a spin, and then the trunk and the back end of it was laying on that thing, and it kept us from going 200 feet down into the ditch. We'd have died if we went down there. But the ironic thing was, Lenny was usually riding with us, and Lenny went with Barry Owen at the time, Barry was running the shows for Don, and Barry was Don's son, right? And we ended up the trunk and the back seat were crushed on this big tree, and I would have been in the back seat had Lenny been there, and I'd have been dead for sure. And so we walked out of that basically unscathed. The car was totaled. I mean, a complete wreck. And if you'd have seen the car, you would not have believed that we walked out there uninjured. You know what I mean? And I think that has to do with learning how to fall, because your body just kind of goes limp, and that's what happened. Our bodies just went limp, and it was just amazing. I remember Dave's he's got these cowboy boots on, and he's laying on top of me, and I'm on the ground. I mean, my window's been busted out, and and I'm kind of laying on this is the passenger side roof, and the door that's kind of laying on the ground there. And I just remember, Dave going, Abby, open up your door. And I said, you open up your door, motherfucker. You're laying on top of me. so he opened up his door and he climbed out, and we both got out of there, and we had to, we waved down the next, there were some wrestlers coming behind us. We waved them down. We got up to a farmhouse, made the phone call, and got the state troopers out there, and we got a little worse for wear, but we made it to the town the next day. So,
any other crazy stories?
God, some that I probably really don't want to talk about.
Right.
But I mean, there was loads of good time. Where, in England, I've had a lot of good road trips. The craziest stories and the road trips, the ones that I always remember were the ones that were dangerous. Another one would have been me and. You remember Duke Dorsey, the dumpster? Yeah. Well, he was. We were over in England, and we were driving up to Hanover from Austria, and we ended up. I was pulling my caravan, and Duke was in my passenger, and we'd had a few drinks, so we're drinking, and all of a sudden, we come up across along a semi. Well, I've got the camper on the back of my car. So my BMW, I'm going past this thing, and as soon as I passed the semi truck, the wind hit me, and the camper started going like this, and it was jumping like side to side to side to side, and all of a sudden, I've just taken my foot off the accelerator. I didn't hit the brakes because I did just jackknife right away. I do offensive driving courses and stuff. And I just remember Duke grabbing the wheel. Well, when he grabbed the wheel, boom, it just turned us. We started to jackknife. And the car just went in front of the truck, and the truck just, pushed us another 150 feet up the road and stuff like that. Both of us walked away again without an injury. My car was totaled, but my camper was okay. So at least it was something.
What are your favorite guys to travel with? Who are some of the guys you like traveling with?
Man, you know what? I've traveled with so many different guys. I really couldn't narrow it down. I enjoyed traveling with Robbie Brooksides over in England. We had a lot of good road trips together. Traveling with Lenny out there in Portland, Lenny and those guys out, Buddy. We had some laughs. I remember Buddy giving me a hard time one time, and I was sitting in the front seat of Lenny had just got a Pathfinder. It was like a 1987 brand new Pathfinder, just the first year they came out. And I remember Buddy giving me some stick, and I bit, and so I bit, and I had this unopened can of beer, right, and I just flipped. I remember squeezing that, and the beer can exploded, and there was beer all over the place. Well, Ed Lisowski was in the, so Lenny was quiet. He was pissed off, this happened, so Ed Lisowski, he's, we're not stopping, so he's pissing in a big super cup glass, right? He's pissing in there, and it's starting to get up to the brim there. And Lenny eyeballs him in the mirror because he knows he's pissing, and he starts laughing, right? So a little bit of the piss spills over, so Lenny pulls over to the side of the road, he's cussing, he's going, I'm driving a $17,000 dumpster. He starts screaming, right? So I go to step out, and Ed pushed the seat forward, and he just threw the piss out the cup, and it went all over my feet, sandaled feet. I'm like, you son of a bitch. So Buddy's in the car, and he's laughing. He's got this big Super Gulp thing full of chocolate milk, right? And so he's laughing. I said, throw me a towel. So we got one of the hotel towels, and I start wiping off my feet, and Buddy's in there laughing. So I take the towel full of piss, and I throw it back in on Buddy, and it hits him right in the face. And Buddy's got a weak stomach, so he starts puking all over the back of Lenny's truck. So he's puking chocolate milk all over the place. Lenny, 4 more hours back to fucking Portland. Lenny didn't say a fucking word.
That's an awesome story. Memories of Scott and Rick, the Steiners.
You know what? I didn't really do too much with them. The only thing I could really tell you about the Steiners is I remember filling in when Scotty tore his bicep or something. And right. I remember filling in, and I worked as Rick's partner against I used to call them the Dirty Dicks, Dick Murdoch and Dick Slater, and I remember enjoying that match. Just working with two legends, three legends in reality. You know what I mean? Working with those guys at that time, it was just a good experience for me.
Memories of Bobby Eaton?
Bobby Eaton, tremendous worker, great guy in the dressing room, just a character that, everybody liked to be around. He always had candy in his bag, and he's just a really good guy. I mean, I'll tell you what, he's in my top 5 of all best workers. If he could have talked, my God,
Yep.
you know what I mean? He's one of my favorite, and watching him work babyface or heel, the guy could do it all, and I just have loads of respect for him.
What do you remember of the scaffold match you're involved in?
I try to forget it every day. I think I drink loads and loads just to forget that thing. It's one of the most embarrassing matches I've ever been in. They forgot to get a scaffolding, so they doctored something up. It was too high. Bobby said he'd take the fall. Dusty said, no, it's not necessary. I thought that thing was a joke. You know what I mean? And it was written up. Their kayfabe sheet said it was crap, and I agree with them. And if they want to blame me for that, then blame me for it. But it was just bad booking.
What was that, Bash 91 maybe? Or?
I think so, yeah. It's just bad booking there. That was bad booked.
What do you remember teaming up with Terry Taylor?
You know what? I can remember a couple matches having with Terry. I remember doing those mixed tags and stuff like that against... and doing stuff like that where I was with Missy Hyatt, and I think Terry was doing the heel thing at the time. Terry was involved with that thing in Sheffield, and I've heard it through the grapevine. He doesn't think too much of me, so obviously he thinks I did it. So I mean, any fond memories I would have had with Terry. Not that I'm not bitter at him or stuff like that, but it's just it's kind of put a cloud over some of the nicer memories I might have had of Terry.
What about Ric Flair? Do you have any memories of Rick?
Seeing him naked down at the dungeon in Atlanta, yeah.
Huh.
Coming down in his robe and stripping off, yeah. I remember stuff like that. But I'll tell you what, in his day, he was a class act. Just a one of the best, workers again of all time. I don't know if I'd put him in my top 5, which might shock a lot of people, but my top 5 is pretty. It's a pretty tight group there. So.
Are you shocked that Rick still wrestles to this day? Or?
No, not at all. I mean, you know what? He's so good at what he does, and it's just like, you know what? He could do it in his sleep. He's you know what? And he still pulls it off. You know what I mean? If he couldn't pull it off, I'd say, hey Rick, it's time to hang out the boots. But what for? He's pulling it off. He's doing a hell of a job.
How did WCW change when Flair left in '91? He took the belt.
And
do you think
it didn't really change? You know what I mean? Did it hurt the company? No, the company was already having issues anyway. Too many chiefs, not enough Indians. Everybody had their own agenda that was in the office at the time, which is, they should have had one guy in charge and one guy doing the whole thing. Because, everybody, somebody's pushing for me, somebody's pushing for them, somebody wants this going on. The angles were starting and not finishing, and it just was a clusterfuck.
Let's see. Were there guys, I guess in the locker room, pissed off that he went to WWE TV with the title?
Not that I can recall. Can you blame him? The guy was going to get paid a lot of money. You know what I mean? Isn't that what this is all about? You know what I mean? It's all about making a living, and that's what we're going to do. If Vince is going to pay him a lot of money, then so be it. I certainly wasn't. I had no hard feelings about it. And you know what? It was, maybe it was time for a change. Maybe it was time to put the belt on I don't know if I agree with putting it on Luger, but I'd have put it on Barry Windham. I know I like the idea when they had put it on Ron Simmons. That was a nice little change.
Right.
But I mean, my guy that should have carried the company forward into the next era would have been Barry Windham. And then a lot of the guys in the dressing room that I recall all thought the same thing, because Barry, we all had respect for Barry.
I was going to ask you your thoughts on Barry.
Yeah, I like Barry Windham. I a lot of respect for him, and I think when I first went to WCW, I remember I was traveling with Randy Colley. I hadn't got the job. They told me to just wait, right? Dusty liked it because Dusty was at the King of the Ring. So he hadn't actually taken over the book, but I'd had my dark match because it was set up. I was set to have when Ole Anderson had the book. I was set up to go in already, but then when Dusty took over, I had to do a dark match, and then I did the thing for Dusty, but he wasn't there, but he saw it in Atlanta the next day, and he loved it, and he just said, yeah, just sit tight, wait until we got a spot for you. And I remember a couple weeks later, drove down with Randy Colley from Alabama down to Panama City, and Randy's knee was bothering him, and I had my stuff in the car, and so Grizzly said, well, can you work for it? Can you do the match? I said, yeah. So put me on with Brad Armstrong. Woo-hoo. What a night off, right?
Right.
And, we were on first and tore the house down, and Barry said, man, come to Marietta TV, man. We're going to get you on. We'll get you on because that's just great. They just loved it. You know what I mean? And so I went to Marietta, and Dusty was there, and he said, no, baby, we just, just wait a little bit, baby. We got some big ideas, and we got some plans, and we're going to give you some time, but just, bear with us, if you will. So, I just had to wait, so, yeah.
Memories of Lex.
Lex, what can you say? He had the best body in the company. Not a great worker, but you gotta respect the guy. The dedication that he had to his body. But I never really had too much, contact with him. I think he's a bit arrogant. You know what I mean?
Everybody says that about Lex.
With a body like that, I guess he's got a right to be arrogant. But, so my contact was kind of limited with him. So I remember seeing him like a couple years later after that, and he was real cool to me, and he was like asked me how I was. It was completely different. I was kind of shocked the way he was because he wasn't like that with me when I was in WCW. But I guess you see a face down the road sometimes, and you just kind of you're interested in how they're doing, right?
Right. Going back to Japan real quickly, when you went over to Japan, how long were you there for?
I was there the first time for 3.5 weeks. It was during the Emperor, when the Emperor died, so the whole country shut down for 2 days.
Wow.
And so 2 days was, we shut down, we were doing nothing. We were sitting in the Keo Plaza, and you couldn't even go to find a restaurant that was open, so it was pretty hard, but I did enjoy myself. I was over one of my favorite people, Bob Orton. I was over there with him, and I played gin rummy with him, and he got me into reading books, and I remember every day we'd play gin rummy, and he'd always take my money in gin rummy, for 3.5 weeks, and then I just remember sitting there, and we were in a hotel, and there was a bowling alley in the hotel, and he goes, well, hey kid, you want a bowl? And I said, yeah, sure. And he goes, why don't we do it the same like we do for with the gin? I said, all right, yeah, fine, best 2 out of 3 or whatever, right? So we did that. So the first game, he smoked me, right? Second game, I got him. The third game, it was neck and neck, and I out-bowled him. So that was the only day in the 3.5 weeks where I got my money back.
That's awesome. Did you like the culture?
Yeah, I did like the Japanese culture. I've been back for Wrestle Aid, which is now defunct. I killed the territory, I guess. But I went back there, and then I should have went back a couple more times for Wrestle Aid, but I just at the time I was with a girl, and she thought she had ovarian cancer, so I had to cancel a tour and look out. I stayed home with her and seen her through her checkups and all that stuff. And another time I was injured with a knee problem, so I didn't go back as much as I should have. But I did enjoy the culture. I like the food over there. I like the people. The women are pretty. I think I like Japan. It's and I think it was just fun. I enjoy. I'm open to all cultures. You know what I mean? I've enjoyed something about every culture I've ever seen throughout the planet. So, and I've been to a few places. So.
Did you like the wrestling style in the ring? The stiffness?
Yeah, I like tight. I like it tight. I prefer tight. Wrestling has enough problems when people calling it fake and whatnot. I don't like the word fake because gravity isn't fake, and I've got loads of injuries, torn muscles and torn ligaments and severed tendons and stuff like that, and it's just I got a lot of bumps and bruises, and there's pieces of me all over the world, for people just to have a go at it like that. And so I try to make sure that as I've progressed in my career, especially after the PN News thing, I really made an effort to make sure that you not to be able to see through my work.
Memories of Sting.
Memories of Sting. I remember there were times when we'd be doing TV and nobody else would get a pop, and Sting was the only one getting popped. The guy was over. You know what I mean? that was he drawing? Nobody was drawing in WCW at the time, but he was definitely over. Definitely over. If he was done in the right way, and later on they did do him in the right way when that NWO stuff.
Right.
And I mean, I didn't agree with the NWO because of that. The whole thing, you're blurring that line between heel and babyface, and that's just that was one of the steps that I think has changed the business to a point where it's like unrecognizable to what I first got into. So.
What was he like outside the ring? Was he approachable or?
Yeah, I mean, I talked to him. He was a nice enough guy. I remember talking to him a few times, talking to him having a workout or doing something like that. But he was not the kind of person not that I wouldn't, but I just never got the opportunity to hang around with the guy. So
now it seemed like after the Steve Austin feud, you were never really moved up further in the card. Why was that?
Well, that was right at the time. That was all right after that. That was the whole thing where that happened in Sheffield and all that stuff. So,
who were some of your favorite guys to work with back in WCW?
Well, that was fun with Austin. I mean, I was pretty much destined to work with Johnny D.B. Bad all the time, and I can't say that was my favorite thing to do because he was green. But they seemed to like him and stuff like that. When I did get a chance to work with me, I did some matches with Mr. Hughes, and he was athletic as hell, and that was. I thought a lot of that. I always like working with big athletic guys. A few times I worked with Vader. That was good. Working Dick Murdoch was a pleasure when I got an opportunity to do that. I wish I'd have been there longer and got an opportunity. Work with Terry Taylor. I worked with Arn Anderson. I got to work with some really good workers, and so it was definitely. I mean, but I really couldn't say that just one really stuck out to me. You know what I mean? Because it was just because of my situation of having to always work with Johnny B. Bad all the time. I was kind of just stuck in a rut. You know what I mean? So.
Was he with Lady Blossom at that point in time?
Not at that time. He just started seeing her, I think, at one point, just toward the end of when I was kind of finishing up there. So.
Memories of Arn Anderson?
Arn Anderson, I enjoyed watching him work with Tully Blanchard, part of that Four Horsemen stuff. Loads of respect, regardless of what he thinks of me. He was one of those things in that company that really stuck out because him and Tully, or when they were doing the Four Horsemen thing, Arn was, he could talk on the mic, he could work. His only thing was he was just a deadpan, he had no facials.
Yeah.
But other than that, I mean, if that's the only thing I could pick apart about his wrestling ability, then God, he's, that's not much, is it?
What about Mick Foley?
Mick Foley, no personal problems with him, but and I think he's a nice guy, a nice fella, but that whole Mick Foley, getting the chainsaw out and trying to cut somebody's head off, and it's that kind of thing is kind of marked the beginning of the end for psychology in the business. You know what I mean? When you can do some of the stuff he did and then get up from it and and do something else. I mean, you got to admit he did sell when he was doing the stuff and he was really hurting.
Right.
But and it got him a job and it made him millions, which is more power to him. But it just changed for me. It's changed the face of the business.
Did any of the boys ever take him on the side and say, "Hey, you're doing too much, less is more," or anything like that?
I never saw anybody do anything, but less is more for us. But you know what? He was doing what he was doing, and who am I to judge? He's made millions, So I mean, all I can do is say, I wish he would have done less. I wish he would have worked more instead of, worked people more instead of just, going out and doing all that crazy stuff. But, whatever.
Now you teamed with Matt Bourne too. What was Matt like inside and outside of the ring?
I traveled a lot with Matt, and I knew Matt since Portland, and Matt was I enjoyed Matt's company when he was rough. He was rough on the edges. He had we just did
an
some
interview
guys.
with him.
Sorry,
we just did an interview with Matt about a month ago, and he told us about his drug problems and stuff.
Yeah,
like
oh yeah, he had a lot of problems like that. But I mean, I remember times when he'd come back to the hotel room and we'd be sharing the hotel room, and he'd be so messed up that he'd just roll out of his bed and he'd piss on the floor. You know what I mean? Instead of going to the bathroom because he was just messed up like that, and and what do? You know what I mean? If he straightened up and he's gotten himself in good order, I'm happy for him, because I think he's a. I mean, Matt in his day, I think that his drug problem was one thing that held him back, because I thought he was as talented as anybody else in the business. So
definitely. Greg Valentine, memories from your matches with Greg?
Old school, very solid worker. You can respect that, and it's just a pleasure to work with somebody who you admired. I mean, it's that old adage, you know what I mean? I remember as a greenhorn, I'd go up to somebody like Greg, or I'd go up to Ray the Crippler, and I'd say, "Hey, it's a pleasure to meet you, sir. I remember watching with you when I was a kid." And that's something you just don't say to these guys, but you know what I mean? You just really, there is a respect, because there's, that's just a generation that's gone, but, again, Greg Valentine's a guy who could still get in the ring and still have a match, you know what I mean? So, and his work is believable, and you can respect that.
At one point in time in WCW, did you feel like you were done with the company? Was it after the incident, or?
Yeah, I pretty much knew at that point, and I still had 6 months at my thing. So it was January that 91 or whatever. I'd just been in the magazine and stuff like that, but I kind of knew, because everybody was treating me different. So I mean, obviously people, believed it, but I remember running into some of those guys like Kevin Nash and Scott Hall later on, and I remember Kevin Nash saying to me, he goes, about all that stuff, man, sorry, because, he apologized to me because, he'd figured it out. It wasn't me, and, because, I knew Scott, and Scott knew I didn't do it. And
was it another one of the boys, or?
Yeah, as far as I heard, Brad Armstrong had told me a couple years later that they caught somebody with their hands in the till. It was one of the referees or something. They'd caught him with the hands in the bag, and he got fired at that point. But wow. I still got, I still carry the burden. You know what I mean? I still get hung up with that crap. So.
Right. Now, after that, did you try to get into WWE at all, or?
Yeah, I actually, there was a couple times when I missed the boat on the WWE. I remember my daughter was conceived, and I went to the first King of the Ring, and that was like about the time Men on a Mission had started. And I remember Sergeant Slaughter coming up to me when I was there, and he goes, "Where have you been? We've been trying to get a hold of you for 3 months." You know what I mean? So there was like something there, and I talked to Pat, and they said, "Oh man, just stick around. We'll find something for you." And I mean, the funny thing about it is, the whole thing is, when I started with the WCW, and I wasn't even under contract. This is a good story. I wasn't even under contract yet, and they'd already done those commercials, the Great American Bash commercials with me, and Jim Hurd was on the phone like, "What, you haven't got," or Petrie was overheard, and Petrie, "What, you haven't got this guy signed up? You get him signed up." And so they were calling me and saying, "Hey, come in, we got a contract for you." So I think it was like May 9th or 10th or what it was, and they called me, Scott Hall, Johnny B. Bad, and Steve Austin all in on the same day, and to sign a contract for the company, right? And everybody signed it right there, and I was the only one that looked at it and said, it's just this thick.
Right.
I said, I just want to think about it and look at it. Before I got home, I lived 2 hours away at the time. Megan PAs, "Hey, there's not going to be any second chance if you don't sign it. There's no job, blah, blah, blah." They were panicking, you know what I mean? And I had to go do a rap in the Omni that Sunday. And I remember seeing Dusty at the Ramada, and Dusty was going, I'll talk to you about it tonight at the Omni. So he pulled me back into these offices, and he's going, "PN, you kind of like my firstborn, the first one I brought in, and I just want to say, sometimes, he just gives me this whole spiel, and I'm like licking it up going, yeah, Dusty, yeah. And sometimes you just got to trust somebody." And I said, "Okay." So I signed the paperwork right there. I got home, and Strongbows left a message on my machine saying, "Vince loves the gimmick. You're supposed to call Pat Patterson on Monday morning."
Wow.
So had I held out for another day, I'd have been in New York instead of being for the WCW. And then that situation happened, like a few years later, where Sergeant Slaughter and he came up to me and said, "Where you been, kid? We've been trying to get in touch with you for 3 months." And then I couldn't hang around. They wanted me to hang around in the States, but I didn't have any work. So I had to go back overseas, and I just never called him back up because my daughter was on the way, and it was about making money and making sure that my daughter had a bed and a roof over her head. So.
You went back over to Europe after WCW.
Yeah.
Did your success in WCW help you at all?
No, because I was still working. I worked a little bit in England as PN News, but I was still called the Avalanche PN News for some reason. Brian Dixon wanted to call me the Avalanche. But I still worked as, in Germany and Austria, and for CWA I was still Cannonball Grizzly. So, I was still working as that. I would get people coming up to me all the time with magazines and pictures from WCW and asking for me to sign them as PN News and all that stuff. But I think it was just a different element, a different, just a different thing for some reason. It just didn't, because WCW was just getting over there. I was on the first tour that WCW went to Europe,
right.
And me and Johnny B. Bad and Jim Herd went over and did the talk shows and set the first tour up for some reason, PN News was over big style in England. I still get people coming up to me all the time, even though I don't look the same as I did back then. They still
I think you look the same.
Well, without a little less hair, right? But I get people coming up all the time and asking me to sign old PN News paraphernalia and stuff like that.
Memories of teaming up with John Bradshaw.
Oh, God, I love working with John. He's another stiff bastard, so I really enjoyed that. We were tag team champions over there for the CWA. We had a blast together, and we just terrorized people when they came into the territory.
Was he a bully?
Bully? I don't know. I've heard the stories later, but I don't think we were bullying. We were just having fun.
Right.
You know what I mean? Over there, everybody was ribbing on with everybody, and if you can't take a rib in this business, you don't belong in the business. You know what I mean? It's not bullying; it's ribbing. Yeah, would some people consider him a bully? Yeah, maybe they would, but I think that's kind of silly because we can all be bullies in this business, and it's just it's a rib. It's you got to enjoy yourself somehow, and sometimes because of the nature of our business, ribs can get sarcastic, and they can be, and you can be a little bit. It can seem a little bit. Odd or racist or but it's not. It's just you're just having a good time. You're trying to entertain yourself the best way you can.
Memories of teaming up with Tony St. Clair.
Oh, I love working against Tony and tagging with him. The thing is I turned babyface very late over there, so I really never got to tag with him as a tag team partner, but I got to work against him in tags and in singles. And Tony St. Clair, for me, is one of the best psychologists that I'd work with. You know what I mean? He knew how to get a crowd going over there. What I saw him and Dave Finley do in Hanover, selling out the venue quite often. It was just a great feud, and I was glad to be part of it sometimes in tags with those guys and stuff like that. So it was always great. Tony was a great psychologist, and he's a mentor for me, and he's a good friend of mine. I talk to him on a regular basis. One of the few guys I do. So.
What was the European territories like at this time?
Well, there was a CWA, and then there was no real independence at the time to speak of, and so you had CWA, you had some stuff going on in France, and then you had England, which was basically either Orig Williams or what was it, Big Timer Promotions, which was the Crabtrees, Big Daddy, maybe you've heard of him, and then you had Brian Dixon. So you know what I mean. Those were your options at the time, and you know what? It's an older school, and you can work the crowd. The work is you can work. You don't have to bend over backwards to please them. They want to be entertained and they want to be worked, and it made the job fun. You know what I mean? It makes the job fun, and I still to this day I still enjoy working in front of a crowd over there because they just really appreciate it.
It's like Puerto Rico. Huh.
Yeah.
Memories of teaming up with Bruiser Mastino.
We had some good matches. We had a little gimmick going on in Hanover that we kind of created ourselves, called ourselves the Brotherhood, and we had some really good matches and some impressive stuff. We used to do this thing where we would do 3 forearms and then we'd headbutt each other, and every third time we'd headbutt each other when we were working together, Mike would end up with his head split open, so I guess I had the harder head. Or maybe mine's just pointed, I don't know. It's a little sharper maybe.
Right.
Yeah.
Now Road Dogg went over there as well, right?
Yeah, me and Road Dogg had the titles there, the tag titles there for a little while as well for the CWA. Enjoyed working with him. He's talented. That whole family. I just can't say enough about that family. That whole family had so much talent, and it's just a wonder that they didn't get more push. You know what I mean? It's just for some reason they never got that push that they really deserved. None of them really did.
What was the party scene like in the territories?
Oh God, there was a lot of good party. We used to have a lot. With in the CWA, with the way it was set up to where you were at home every night and you were basically, like in Hanover, you'd walk out of the tent because we wrestle in a tent, 1,500 people cedar tent, right? And we'd walk out back and our campers were 100 feet away from the tent, so you were literally right home. And we used to just, we'd have these tents on the front of our campers, and we'd sit in front of them, and we'd have drinks and beer, and then a few shots of whiskey, and then we'd go into town and go get drunk at a place called the Poopash or the Brauhaus or somewhere like that, and you could go out, you can get drunk, and you could sleep it off the next day because you had all day to get ready for the show. So you didn't have to get in a car and travel, because that's the one thing I have to say is traveling is the worst part of this business, because it does more damage to my body than the actual wrestling does. So
just mentally,
I think physically, some of the, like in Europe especially, you're sitting in these cars and they're not like Cadillacs, and they're not like Range Rovers, or they're smaller cars, and you're sitting in these cars and they're driving you nuts, and my knee's pushed in here and it's pushed in on this side, and I'm just my shoulder's like this, so my shoulder's starting to fall asleep because I just can't stretch it out. And physically it's just demanding. And then when you've been sitting in there and everything's cramped up and you haven't been able to move your knee for 5 hours, you get out of the car and then you go in, even if you stretch and stuff like that, you put that kind of, you've had your knee in that position, it's just not going to function properly, and you get injured. You get more susceptible to injuries when you're sitting in a vehicle for that amount of time. I mean, it's one thing if you got a Cadillac, but it wasn't like that, you know what I mean?
Did WCW ever try to bring you back?
No, I never attempted it. You know what I mean? Once I went back over there, I kind of focused myself. I was making a good living over there. I didn't need, it'd have been great to come and make these big salaries and stuff like that. But I never ever even attempted it. The only time I even took it into consideration while I was over there is when Sergeant Slaughter came up to me that time. I mean, for me, I was enjoying it. My family was over there. My wife and my daughter. I was, living with them. Now we're divorced, but at the time she wanted to be over there, so it was good for me, and there was enough work to be had, and I could work 7 months out of the year, and 7-8 months out of the year, and I could sit home for 4 months, and and I wouldn't have to work, So
how come you left the territory in '98 for back to the States?
Divorce. I got divorced and I came back to the United States. Actually, my hip, I was having real problems with my sciatic when I actually came to ECW, and I just sometimes I would go in the bathroom because I was in so much pain to put my boot on. I mean, I never really told anybody about it. You know what I mean? It was just my own cross to bear, and I kept trying to go, and I actually thought it was the end of my career. I ended up selling cars for a little while. I mean, I had help from friends, Dave Finley. I mean, I stayed with him for a little while, and and then after that, and so I mean, that was I appreciated his support and him and his wife, and And I remember doing the ECW, and I was having that problem. Like I said, I thought my career was over, and I sold cars for about 3 or 4 months, and then all of a sudden, my hips started feeling better, and I remember heading back to England after that, and just in England there was a good business. I mean, beginning in 2000, 2001, 2, and 3 through 4 in England, the business was just kick butt. I mean, they were selling out every venue for All-Star Promotions. So.
What about ECW? What are your memories about Paul Heyman?
Paul Heyman, he had a lot of ideas. He had a lot of energy. He really wanted ECW to be a great thing. I just think the only thing that there was a lot of ideas that went through into that, and a lot of guys worked hard. But the only problem with ECW is I think it was just too much hardcore and not enough psychology.
Right.
Yeah.
Did you know Paul at all from WCW?
I know WCW. I remember Paul. I remember doing the Danger Zone, and he made me. He built me $1 million. You know what I mean? Put me over like Rover. You know what I mean? And then I'll never forget, we were doing these mixed tags. Missy Hyatt was my tag team partner, and I think he was either Terry Taylor or Arn Anderson. One was with Arn Anderson, and one was Terry Taylor. And I remember doing the Meadowlands, and I had the broken record on him, and he was shitting himself. He really was. And I'll never forget, he came out, when I came out of the ring, he goes, "Oh, brother, thank you for taking care of me. Thank you." I didn't stiff him at all. I tried to, I don't want to hurt anybody out there. You know what I mean? I'll be tight, but I'm not going out there. I'm not going to, somebody gives me their body, I'm not going to take advantage of it.
How did the boys treat you in ECW locker room?
We all got along. I thought everybody got along pretty well. I mean, there was a lot of respect there. People knew who I was. I remember getting in there and getting along with everybody. I mean, I still have a little bit of contact with a few of the guys. Jerry Lynn's, I like Jerry Lynn, and I mean, I still have a little bit of contact with Jerry. So,
any memories of your matches with Spike Dudley? And did it bother you at all to put Spike over?
No, this is part of the business.
Right.
You know what I mean? I'm not getting paid anymore to win or lose. You know what I mean? I could care less. And it was just they wanted me to do it. I went in and did my job. They said, "Well, just do this," and I said, "Well, what if we did this?" And they loved they loved the little input that I had. So I went out there and did it. It got over like Rover. It was great for the Philadelphia the crowd there, and it was funny. I used to come up here as PN News as a good guy, and they used to boo me.
Yeah.
And I come back up as a bad guy, and they're still booing me.
Yeah.
I don't know how to take these guys from Philly. I don't know. I don't get it.
Memories of the matches with the Baldies.
Yeah, the Baldies was an interesting thing, and I thought it could have ended up being something pretty good. I remember working with like New Jack and those guys and Balls and all that, and it's just the only thing with it, so much hardcore, it just gets to be too repetitive and too much. But you know what? I enjoyed it. I enjoyed doing a couple of the interviews that I did. I put on that high voice and was talking like, I guess, Curly, white guys, and
right.
So I kind of enjoyed it for the short time it lasted, but it's just moving on.
Thoughts on Tommy Dreamer?
I like Tommy, nice guy, guy that, yeah, I'm glad he got a little time in there in New York, and he got to do some of the stuff he was doing, and I got a lot of respect for Tommy. Memories
of working with Sabu?
I like working with Sabu. I enjoyed it. I mean, even though it was like it's hardcore stuff. I mean, I like him. I like those guys. I remember working with Mike Awesome. I enjoyed working with Mike Awesome. Van Damme. All those guys. I mean, I enjoyed Van Damme and Awesome and Sabu, working with those three most of all when I was there.
Did you leave ECW on good terms?
No, I moved back. I was moving back to Omaha when I was in Atlanta, and they just couldn't fly me in. And I just said, "Hey, and then all of a sudden I wasn't getting booked anymore. And I said, "Hey, Paul," I called Paulie on the phone. Of course, he never answers his phone. And I said, "Paulie," I said, "You know what? If you're not booking me anymore, or you're firing me, at least be man enough to get on the phone and tell me." You know what I mean? So I left it on the voice message. Of course, I never heard from him, so I could care less. You know what I mean? I've never struggled to find work in this business, so it was no problem for me. You know what I mean? I found work immediately. So
you went back over to England, I believe.
Yes.
Memories of teaming up with Road Warriors in UK. Or was it just Hawk?
It was just we did a Hawk thing, and then there was an imitation Hawk. You got to remember they were doing a lot of that copycat stuff there.
Right.
So, and I didn't like. I really didn't like that. I remember the promoter asking me to do it, and I said, no, I'm not going to do that. And I said, I'll work as myself. So I never ever worked on those shows as anything but myself. You know what I mean? I was like, listen, I've been on TV. Why should I work as as a copycat gimmick? And he was like, okay, So he had enough respect for me not to ask me to do it, again.
Is it hard for an American to make a living in wrestling independently in Europe?
No, I actually think it's pretty easy. I mean, this year I'll probably do 170 matches this year. So, I mean, that's more than most independents are getting in the States, right?
Yeah, definitely. Huh. What are the politics like in European wrestling?
Well, a lot of the thing is with Brian Dixon. Brian Dixon is the number one promoter in Europe right now. He's running more shows than anybody, and I'm on good terms with him. So for me, I really don't feel the politics. I've had a 20-year relationship with Brian. Whenever I called him, I was welcome to come in. So I mean, for me, I've never felt the politics. There is a pecking order, and sometimes you want to be treated better, but over and all, you wish you were making more. But he's paying what he can. And to keep his business going, you know what I mean? He's always going to plead poverty, but every promoter does. As far as and then I work for the EWA in Austria, or I work for the European Wrestle Promotion in Germany and Hanover for Chris Eckstein and stuff like that. And I really enjoy working for them, because Chris is him and Robbie and Danny Collins and we all go together, and we all really in the end it's Chris's show, but he listens, he's open to ideas, and we all work together to make it the best thing possible. And I just really appreciate that kind of show when somebody gives me the opportunity to and I've drawn money for companies on a smaller scale. I've never put 100,000 people in a seat in an angle, but I mean, I've filled up venues with, of course, not alone, because I mean it takes three. If it's a singles match, just three people out there. There's you, the wrestler, and the referee, and it takes everybody working together to make it work. And then you got to have the promoter and the booker. They got to put that stuff together for you, and you got to make it. Everybody makes it work. And so I appreciate doing stuff like that, and I work with Chris Raybar for EWA, and he thinks the old school way, and that's something that I've tried to, not just me. I mean, there's other guys, but we've tried to instill in these European wrestlers the old school, and they've really taken it on. And being like one of the senior guys in the dressing room at all times, they're always coming to me and asking me a lot of questions. So I try to, and anybody who's asking me questions, I'm going to give them advice, and I'll be honest and open with them, and because I think it's really neat when somebody really is interested in learning, and but it's, so I don't really, because of my tenure, I really don't have to deal with the politics that other wrestlers might have to.
What is Irish Whip Wrestling?
Irish Whip, it's a small promotion in Ireland. I don't even know if they're running anymore. He used to bring in some talent, and now he's using cheap, guys that will work for free. And that's the kind of thing that winds me up, because it cheapens the business. Because you know what, when you call yourself a professional wrestler, then you need to get a wage. Your transport's got to be paid, and you got to get a wage. These kids that are coming in and say, I'll pay my own transport, and just put me on the show. You don't even have to pay me. That kind of thing just winds me up, because it's taking the piss. Because there's a lot of good workers that are sitting at home. I'm fortunate enough to be working. There's a lot of guys that are great workers that are sitting at home because some clown is working for free.
What are your thoughts on the current boom in Italy?
Well, the boom's kind of over in Italy.
Wasn't
it was there for a while. Rikishi and those guys, and they got their money out of that stuff. But I think I think it could have if some people wouldn't have got so greedy, I think it might have and it each his own, and go get your money. And I mean, I went in there and I sat in there at the Coliseum, and not the old Coliseum, but the Coliseum venue in Rome, and in front of 11,000 people. It was filled to the rafters, and it was it was just a great atmosphere. But the thing is the tragedy of the whole thing is if it had been spread out and that money would have gone right. I mean, and people wouldn't have got greedy. That could have lasted a lot longer. You know what I mean?
Right.
We could have made it go, drag out, and it could have been really good for a few more years. But
weren't they doing great with merchandise sales? Weren't they getting like WWE merchandise in there and then selling tons of it?
Yeah, they were doing stuff like that. So, I mean, and that's what the people, was on TV. So it was really good. But the boom's basically over there because it's kind of been killed off.
You pretty much work a full schedule still to this day?
Yeah, like I said, I'll be 150 to 170 matches this year, which is, more than enough to pay the bills.
Is there anyone, I guess, in Europe that you saw work that you thought would make it but never really made it?
Good question. Well, you know what? There's some up and coming guys that are gonna make it. The guy most that could have made it and probably didn't just because he was a little smaller was Danny Collins, one of the most talented wrestlers I've ever seen and come across, in my career. Really should have been there. He should have been working for New York. If they were hiring guys like Rey Mysterio and stuff like that, they should have hired Danny Collins because Danny Collins was just tremendous, and he's still working today. He's 2 years younger than me, and he's been in the business 2 years longer.
Wow.
He started when he was 14, and got in at the right time, learned a lot, and just, can work with anybody, and his stuff is tight and really looks solid. And I'd say of all the people that should have got a break, should have got one of those breaks and didn't, was probably Danny Collins.
Looking back, you have any regrets?
No, you can't have regrets, man. I mean, things could have been different, sure, but I don't have any regrets. I don't hold anybody accountable to anything. I mean, either you're going to get the break or you're not. And everybody could... not everybody's going to get that break. There's a lot of great workers, and probably some of the better workers never got that break. Do I consider myself one of the best workers? I can't say that. That's somebody else is going to have to make that judgment. But I just feel that there's a lot of guys that a lot of guys just aren't going to get that chance, And so if you start regretting everything, then you're going to be bitter and you're going to end up having problems, drugs, alcohol, and stuff like that. I enjoy beer now and again. Don't get me wrong,
right?
But no, I basically don't regret it.
Out of all the wrestling deaths, which has hit you the hardest?
I'd have to say probably the Kurt Hennig thing really was a shock to me. I was really surprised when he went. I really didn't expect that at all. He just, he didn't come across like a guy who was going to end up dying in a hotel room. Just really didn't. It's just, it was something. It just bothered me. At that point. I mean, I hadn't even talked to him probably in about 10 years. Before he died, but. It was, just because he influenced me at an early age and, when I got into the business and stuff like that. And every time I saw him, we got along and we'd go and have a few drinks, we'd party together, we'd have a good time and we'd pick up where we left off. I mean, it was just, it was a shock to me when I found out he'd passed.
What are your thoughts on UFC Boom?
Great. Mixed martial arts is pretty violent, you know what I mean? I don't think it affects us. I think that is more, it affects boxing more than us because we appeal to young men in their puberty, but at the same time we appeal to children and we're more family oriented in our entertainment than what UFC would be. So it's not affecting us.
Would you ever want to write a book?
I just don't think that I've, if New York called me and said, hey, listen, we're going to give you a run and all that stuff, and we want to use you, and I got a 3-year run with them or a 2-year run or whatever with New York, I might think about it then, but right now I just don't think that there's going to be enough people out there that are going to buy the PN News book, you know what I mean? Some people will remember me, some people won't, really neither not here and there, but I mean, I've enjoyed my career, and I'm going to keep going until I can't go anymore, and hopefully I'll quit before I've washed up, you know what I mean? So.
Is there anything you want to say to your fans out there that you never had a chance to say?
No, thanks for the support over the years, I appreciate it. believe none of what you hear and only half of what you see. So, you know, if you're a Grizzlite and you're over in Europe and you're watching me there, get your asses down to the show. And if you want to see me in the United States, you'll have to talk to your local promoter, and I'll be more than happy to fly back and come wrestle in front of you guys. Thanks a lot.
Thanks for being here today. It was a great interview.
Thank you.